scream pierces the quiet village night, and a body lies lifeless in the vicarage garden. Who could unravel such a chilling mystery? Step into St. Mary Mead, where Miss Marple's sharp mind sees what others miss. Chapter 1. The Village Awakens. To murder the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead buzzes with whispers as dawn breaks over its quaint cottages. A murder has shattered the piece-a-rare event in this tight-knit community where everyone knows everyone else's business. The victim, Colonel Lucius Protheroe, a gruff and unpopular man, was found sprawled in the vicarage garden, a bullet through his head. The news spreads like wildfire, and the villagers gather in huddled groups, speculating wildly. Was it a jealous rival, a scorned lover, or something far darker? Enter Miss Jane Marple, an elderly spinster with a knack for noticing the smallest details that often hold the key to the truth. In this chapter, we'll set the stage for the mystery, introduce our beloved sleuth, and dive into the early chaos of the investigation. The story begins on a crisp autumn morning, the kind where mist clings to the hedgerows and the air smells of damp leaves. St. Mary Mead is the picture of rural charm. Ivy-covered stone houses, a small church with a lopsided steeple, and a high street lined with shops where gossip flows as freely as tea. But today, the usual chatter about harvest festivals or Mrs. Price's new hat is replaced by something grim. Colonel Protheroe, a wealthy landowner and churchwarden, was discovered dead just after midnight. His body was found by the vicar, Leonard Clement, who'd stepped outside to investigate a strange noise. The colonel lay face down near the rose bushes, blood pooling beneath him, a revolver glinting nearby. The village constable, a nervous young man named Hurst, quickly cordoned off the scene, but not before curious onlookers caught a glimpse. Now, let's meet Miss Marple. She's no ordinary villager. At first glance, she's just a frail woman in her late 60s, with snowy hair tucked under a laced cap and a penchant for knitting. She lives in a modest cottage near the church, her garden bursting with dahlias. But don't be fooled by her quiet demeanor. Miss Marple has spent decades observing human nature, and her mind is as sharp as a tack. She's the kind of person who notices when a neighbor's curtains are drawn at an odd hour, or when someone's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. As the village reels from the murder, Miss Marple sits by her window, sipping tea and listening to the rumors carried by her maid, Mary. She's already piecing together the puzzle, even if no one else realizes it yet. The investigation kicks off with Inspector Slack, a brusque city detective who arrives from the nearby town of Much Benham. Slack is all business, barking orders and scribbling notes. He's quick to assume the killer is an outsider, maybe a vagrant passing through. After all, who in St. Mary Mead could commit such a crime? The colonel wasn't well liked. His temper and high-handed ways rubbed many the wrong way, but murder? That's unthinkable. Slack questions the vicar first, who's shaken but cooperative. Leonard Clement admits he argued with Protheroe earlier that day about church funds, but he swears he was in his study when the shot rang out. The vicar's wife, Griselda, a lively young woman with a flair for drama, vouches for him, though her nervous giggles raise a few eyebrows. Meanwhile, the village is a hotbed of theories. At the Blue Boar pub, old Mr. Archer swears he saw a shadowy figure near the vicarage at dusk. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, claims Protheroe had enemies aplenty, especially after he threatened to evict a tenant farmer, Tom Redding. Even the colonel's own daughter, Lettice, seems oddly detached, more interested in her tennis game than her father's death. Miss Marple takes it all in, her knitting needles clicking steadily. She knows that in a village like this, secrets are never far from the surface. People talk, and she listens. Already, she's noticed something odd. The vicarage clock, usually so reliable, was running 10 minutes fast the night of the murder. A small detail, but to Miss Marple, it's a thread worth pulling. As the chapter closes, the village is on edge, and Inspector Slack's investigation is just getting started. He's focused on the obvious motive, opportunity, the revolver found at the scene. But Miss Marple sees things differently. To her, the murder isn't just about who pulled the trigger. It's about why and what lies beneath the polite surface. Of St. Mary Mead, she's already forming a mental list of suspects, from the vicar with his flustered alibi to the mysterious stranger seen lurking near the church. The stage is set for a classic whodunit, and Miss Marple is ready to unravel the truth, one keen observation at a time. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we'll follow her as she begins to dig deeper into the village's secrets, uncovering clues that others overlook. Chapter 2. Uncovering Hidden Motives. The sun climbs higher over St. Mary Mead. The initial shock of the murder gives way to a tense undercurrent of suspicion. Miss Marple, ever the quiet observer, begins her subtle inquiries, chatting with neighbors over tea and garden fences. She knows that beneath the village's serene facade lie tangled webs of grudges and secrets. In this chapter, we'll explore the potential motives swirling around Colonel Protheroe's death, from financial disputes to romantic entanglements, and see how Miss Marple starts connecting the dots with her unerring insight. The Colonel was a man who made enemies easily, his brusque manner and iron-fisted control over local affairs rubbing many the wrong way. Take Lawrence Redfern, for instance, a dashing archaeologist renting a cottage on the Colonel's estate. Redfern had been excavating an ancient barrow on Protheroe's land, but the Colonel accused him of trespassing and threatened to shut down the dig over a cup of Earl Grey with her friend Dolly Bantry. Miss Marple learns that Redfern was seen arguing heatedly with Protheroe just days before the murder. Dolly, always eager for a bit of scandal, whispers that Redfern might have more than professional reasons for his anger rumours swirl about his flirtations with the Colonel's young wife, Anne Protheroe. Anne, a striking woman with sad eyes, had married the much older Colonel for security, but village tongues wag about her unhappiness. Miss Marple nods thoughtfully, recalling how Anne's laughter at the church fete seemed forced, her gaze lingering a tad too long on the handsome Redfern. Then there's Dr. Haydock, the village physician, a kindly man with a gruff exterior. He treated the Colonel for gout, but Protheroe was a difficult patient, often ignoring advice and berating the doctor in public. Miss Marple overhears at the grocer's that Haydock once stormed out of the Colonel's manor after a particularly nasty row about unpaid bills. Could professional frustration boil over into violence? Miss Marple doubts it. Haydock's hands are healers, not killers, but she files it away, knowing motives can twist in unexpected ways. She pays a visit to the doctor's surgery under the pretense of a minor ailment, casually steering the conversation to the murder. Haydock admits the Colonel was a tyrant, but his alibi seemed solid. He was attending a birth in a neighbouring hamlet that night. Still, Miss Marple notices his fidgety manner, a telltale sign that something's amiss. Romantic jealousies add another layer to the intrigue. Lettice Protheroe, the Colonel's daughter from his first marriage, is a flighty girl of 20, more interested in fashion and parties than family duties. She's been seen canoodling with Ronald Hawes, the curate, a earnest young man whose sermons are as fiery as his blushes. Protheroe disapproved vehemently, calling Hawes a milksop and forbidding the match. Miss Marple, while tending her roses, chats with the curate as he passes by. Hawes confesses his love for lettuce, but denies any ill will toward her father, though his trembling hands suggest deeper turmoil. Miss Marple ponders if forbidden love could drive someone to desperation, drawing parallels to a long-ago village scandal where a jilted suitor turned vengeful. Financial woes plague several villagers, providing fertile ground for motive. Tom, reading The Tenant Farmer Facing Eviction, had begged Protheroe for more time on his rent, only to be met with scorn. Reading's wife, a tearful woman with 5 children, tells Miss Marple over laundry lines that her husband was beside himself with worry. Reading claims he was home with his family at the time of the murder, but Miss Marple spots a discrepancy. His boots, caked with mud from the vicarage path, tell a different story. She doesn't confront him yet, preferring to gather more threads for her tapestry. Similarly, the Colonel's secretary, Gladys Cram, a sharp-tongued woman from the city, handled his accounts and knew of his shady investments. Whispers suggest she embezzled funds, and Protheroe discovered it. Gladys, when questioned by Miss Marple during a chance meeting at the tea shop, bristles defensively, her alibi a vague out for a walk. Miss Marple senses fear behind her bravado. Inspector Slack barrels ahead with his inquiries, focusing on physical evidence like footprints in the garden and the revolver's ownership belonged to the Colonel himself, kept in his study. He suspects suicide at first, but the angle of the wound rules it out. Slack interviews Anne Protheroe, who breaks down in tears, admitting her marriage was loveless, but denying any affair. Redfern, under scrutiny, provides a flimsy alibi of working late on his dig. Slack's methods are blunt, alienating witnesses, while Miss Marple's gentle probing yields richer insights. She visits the Protheroe manor, ostensibly to offer condolences, and notices a missing letter opener from the desker, potential weapon. No, the murder was by gunshot, but the detail nags at her. As motives pile up, Miss Marple begins to see patterns. Human nature, she muses, is predictable. Greed, love, revenge, the eternal drivers. She recalls a similar case in her youth, where a seemingly unrelated theft masked a murder's true intent. Practical tip for aspiring sleuths: always look beyond the obvious. Ask not just who benefits, but who hurts the most. Miss Marple tests her theories by dropping subtle hints in conversations, watching reactions. When she mentions the clock discrepancy to Anne, the widow pales slightly. A clue. The chapter builds tension as secrets simmer, ready to boil over. Wrapping up, Miss Marple has uncovered a mosaic of motives, each villager a potential piece in the puzzle. But motives alone don't solve crimes. Alibis and evidence must align. In the next chapter, we'll delve into the tangled web of alibis, seeing how Miss Marple pokes holes in stories that seem airtight, bringing us closer to the killer's identity. Chapter 3. Tangled alibis. Unravel with motives laid bare like cards on a table. The focus shifts to alibis, the fragile shields suspects hide behind. Miss Marple, armed with her unassuming charm, begins to test these stories, gently prodding for inconsistencies that could crack the case wide open. In this chapter, we'll dissect the alibis of key players, from ironclad claims to flimsy excuses, and watch as Miss Marple's keen eye spots the lies woven into the truth, inching us toward the heart of the mystery. Alibis are the backbone of any investigation, those carefully constructed timelines that place people far from the scene of the crime. Inspector Slack attacks them, head-on grilling suspects in the vicarage parlour turned makeshift headquarters. He starts with Lawrence Redfern, the archaeologist whose heated arguments with the colonel make him a prime suspect. Redfern claims he was alone at his dig site until late, poring over artifacts under lantern light. No witnesses, he admits, but he points to a fresh layer of soil disturbed that night as proof. Slack snorts dismissively, noting the dig is only a mile from the vicarage, plenty of time to slip away and back. Miss Marple, visiting the site under the guise of interest in ancient history, notices something Slack misses. Redfern's lantern, still warm the next morning, but with a wick trimmed unevenly, as if hastily relit. She recalls a similar trick from a poaching incident years ago, where a farmer faked his presence with a timed lamp. Practical tip for detectives: always check the small mechanics of an alibi. They often betray the haste of fabrication. Next up is Anne Protheroe, the widow whose sorrow seems genuine, but whose eyes dart nervously during questioning. She insists she was at home in the manor, reading in the drawing room, with the maid confirming she never left. The manor is across the village green from the vicarage, visible from several windows, yet no one saw her silhouette against the curtains. Slack accepts it for now, moved by her tears, but Miss Marple isn't convinced. Chatting with the maid over scones, Miss Marple learns Anne had slipped out earlier for fresh air, returning flushed and breathless. Anne's alibi hinges on the maid's loyalty, but Miss Marple spots a crack. The book's page marker, placed at a chapter Anne had discussed weeks before, suggesting it hadn't been read that night. Human nature tip: grief can mask guilt, but details like untouched books reveal the performance. Miss Marple tests this by casually mentioning the book's plot to an HO fumbles the details, her composure slipping just enough to raise doubts. Dr. Haydock's alibi appears solid as a rock. He was miles away, delivering a baby at the Wilkins farm, with the grateful parents and midwife as witnesses. The birth record logs the time precisely, overlapping with the murder window. Slack ticks it off his list, praising the doctor's dedication. But Miss Marple, ever thorough, cycles to the farm for a charity visit. There, she discovers the clock in the farmhouse runs 5 minutes slower, common rural quirk, and the midwife admits to a quick nap during labour. Could Haydock have dashed back to the village? Unlikely, but Miss Marple notes his horse was lathered that morning, as if ridden hard. She ponders if a medical man could time a birth to cover his tracks, drawing from an old case where a doctor used ether to fake timelines. Tip for sleuths: verify timepieces. A minute's discrepancy can unravel hours of planning. Haydock, when she mentions the clock, laughs it off, but his grip on his stethoscope tightens. A subtle tell: Lettice Protheroe and Ronald Hawes share an alibi that's as romantic as it is suspicious. A secret rendezvous in the churchyard gazebo, far from prying eyes. They claim to have been there from dusk till after the shot echoed, whispering sweet nothings. No one saw them, of course, but Lettice produces a pressed flower from that night as proof. Slack rolls his eyes at the sentimentality, but presses Hawes, whose clerical collar seems suddenly too tight. Miss Marple, overhearing their story at a parish meeting, recalls the gazebo's creaky bench, which wasn't oiled until the next day. If they'd sat there, the noise would have carried. She visits the spot, finding no footprints in the dukest grass, suggesting no one lingered. Love can blind, she muses, but it also inspires elaborate lies. Tip: romantic alibis often crumble. Under practical scrutiny, emotions leave traces, or the lack thereof. When she gently questions Lettuce about the flowers species out of season, the girl blushes, her story fraying at the edges. Tom Redding's alibi is straightforward. Home, with his family, tucking in the children. His wife and eldest son corroborate, their faces earnest. The farm is on the village outskirts, a brisk walk from the vicarage. Slack, sniffing opportunity, notes Redding's muddy boots matching the garden soil. Redding explains it away as from his fields, but Miss Marple examines them closely during a neighbourly chat. The mud has flecks of vicarage rose petals, unique to that garden. She doesn't accuse, instead sharing a story of a lost earring found in similar dirt, watching Redding squirm. Financial desperation breeds bold risks, she thinks, like a tenant sneaking to plead or confront one last time. Tip, physical evidence. Ties alibis to reality. Ignore it at your peril. Redding's family sticks to their tale, but the boy's wide eyes hint at coached words. Gladys Cram, the secretary, offers a vague alibi, a solitary walk along the riverbank to clear her head after a long day. No witnesses, but she describes the moon's reflection vividly. Slack suspects embezzlement as motive and alibi weakness, planning to dig into her finances. Miss Marple encounters her at the bridge, casually asking about wildlife sightings. Gladys mentions owls hooting, but Miss Marple knows the local owls were silent that night due to a storm earlier verified by birdwatching friends. A fabricated detail, perhaps. Miss Marple probes further, learning Gladys carried a satchel, bulky enough for documents or a revolver. Tip, sensory details in alibis can be double-edged. Nature doesn't lie. Gladys falters when pressed on the path's muddiness, her shoes suspiciously clean, as alibis tangle like overgrown vines. Inspector Slack grows frustrated, his notebook filled with contradictions. He reconvenes suspects, hoping pressure will break someone. Miss Marple, meanwhile, maps timelines on scrap paper, cross-referencing clocks, distances, and habits. She notices a pattern. Many alibis overlap oddly around the church clock's chime, which echoes village-wide. Was the shot timed to coincide, masking it? Practical advice: build a timeline chart. Visual aids reveal overlaps and gaps. Miss Marple shares a tea-time anecdote about a synchronized village prank gone wrong, subtly guiding Slack toward rechecking times. The vicar and his wife have alibis intertwined. Leonard in his study, Griselda preparing supper. A parishioner knocked earlier, confirming their presence. But Miss Marple recalls Griselda's apron, flour-dusted but with no baking scent in the air. A staged domestic scene. The vicar's study window overlooks the garden. Did he see something he won't admit? Tip: household alibis rely on routine. Disrupt the pattern to test truth. When Miss Marple drops by with jam, Griselda's chatter turns evasive, her laughter forced. Layer by layer, alibis erode under Miss Marple's scrutiny. Redfern's lantern, Anne's book, Haydock's horsage, a chink in the armour. She senses the killer's alibi is the most polished, hiding the deepest flaw. The village hums with tension, whispers growing as doubts spread. Slack begrudgingly starts, valuing her gossip, though he calls it intuition. In wrapping this chapter, the alibis have been probed and poked, revealing fissures that promise revelations. Miss Marple's method shines. Patience over force, observation over accusation. But alibis are just one thread. Physical clues await examination. Join us in the next chapter as we hunt for evidence left at the scene, from footprints to forgotten items and see how Miss Marple interprets what the eyes overlook. Chapter 4. Hunting for hidden evidence. As alibis crumble like dry leaves underfoot, the hunt turns to the silent witnesses left at the crime scene: footprints, fibers, and forgotten trifles that speak volumes to those who listen. Miss Marple, with her magnifying glass tucked in her knitting bag, ventures closer to the vicarage garden, her sharp eyes scanning for clues that bumbling boots might have trampled. In this chapter, we'll comb through the physical evidence scattered like puzzle pieces from the revolver's grip to mysterious marks in the mud, and discover how Miss Marple interprets these signs with her trademark blend of common sense and cunning, bringing the killer's shadow into sharper focus. The crime scene is a patchwork of chaos and calm. The vicarage garden, usually a haven of blooming roses and neatly trimmed lawns, now cordoned off with fluttering tape. Colonel Protheroe lies where he fell, though covered now with a sheet, his body outlined in chalk like a macabre drawing. Inspector Slack paces the perimeter, his assistants dusting for prints and photographing every angle. The revolver, a Webley .38 from the Colonel's own collection, rests nearby, one chamber empty, the barrel still faintly warm when discovered. Slack theorizes it was snatched in a struggle, but Miss Marple, peering over the fence during her afternoon stroll, notices the grip, wiped clean, no fingerprints save a smudge that could be glove residue. She recalls a burglary in the village years back, where a thief used lard-smeared gloves to avoid Mark's practical tip for investigators: always check for unnatural It screams concealment. Slack dismisses her observation as meddling, but jots it down anyway, his mustache twitching in annoyance. Footprints tell their own tale, etched in the soft earth near the body. A jumble of them, the vicar's sensible brogues. Rushing to the scene, the constable's heavy boots circling, and deeper impressions that Slack attributes to the killer. These led from the garden gate, meander through the flower beds, and vanish at the hedgerow. Measuring them with a tape from her sewing kit, Miss Marple notes their size 9, men's, with a worn heel on the left suggesting a limp or uneven gait. She cross-references this mentally with villagers. Lawrence Redfern favors sturdy hiking boots, but his are new. Tom Redding's work boots are caked in farm mud, but the pattern doesn't match. Dr. Haydock wears polished Oxfords, too refined for garden tromping. Tip for clue hunters: footprints are like signatures. Compare them to suspects' shoes discreetly, perhaps by accidentally spilling tea to force a change. Miss Marple does just that at an impromptu gathering, spilling a drop on Redfern's boot, and noting the soles tread close, but no cigar. A scrap of fabric snagged on a rose thorn catches Miss Marple's eye next. A tiny thread of blue wool, fine and expensive. Not from the Colonel's tweed jacket or the vicar's clerical garb. She plucks it carefully with tweezers borrowed from the doctor's kit, tucking it away. Back home, under her reading lamp, she compares it to samples, and Protheroe's shawl is similar but coarser. Gladys Cram wears synthetics from the city. It matches the curate's scarf, a gift from Lettuce Ronald Hawes, with his nervous habits, might have torn it in haste. But Hawes claims he lost his scarf days ago. Miss Marple muses on how lovers exchange tokens, and how a scarf could muffle a shot or wipe a weapon. Evidence tip: fibers link people to places. Collect and catalogue them like stamps, tracing origins through laundry marks or weave patterns. She visits the local seamstress, who confirms the wool's source. A London shop frequented by Lettuce. The garden gate creaks on unoiled hinges, a sound Miss Marple knows well from her own cottage. The killer likely entered there, avoiding the gravel path's crunch, but a bent latch suggests force was it jimmied. Slack finds no tool marks, but Miss Marple spots a fresh scratch, as if from a key or pin. She thinks of hairpins, women like, and all let us use them, strong enough to pick a simple lock. Testing her theory, she borrows a pin from Dolly Bantry and demonstrates on her shed. It works with a twist. Tip: everyday items make impromptu tools. Consider gender norms in clue interpretation, but don't assume men can use pins too. This clue widens the suspect pool, pointing to someone familiar with the vicarage. Knowing the gate's weakness, dot near the body, a cigarette stub smoulders faintly, half buried in dirt. The brand, Egyptian, exotic for St. Mary Mead, where locals prefer pipe tobacco or cheap roll-ups. Slack bags it, suspecting an outsider, but Miss Marple knows better. Lawrence Redfern smokes them, claiming they remind him of digs in Cairo, but Anne Protheroe has been seen with a silver case of the same, a gift from her husband. Ironically, saliva on the filter could yield clues, but in these pre-DNA days, it's about habits, who lights up under stress. Miss Marple observes Redfern at the pub, nervously puffing one after another, his fingers stained yellow. Evidence practical, vices leave trails, tracks smoking spots, and brands to place people at scenes. She recalls a case where a rare cigar, ash pinned a poacher, a forgotten glove, leather and supple, lies under a bush, missed in the initial sweep. Right-handed, monogrammed with faint initials, LP, kernels. No, his are bulkier, She favours kid gloves for driving her sporty car, or Lawrence's. Miss Marple retrieves it slyly, sniffing a whiff of colonsand or wood Redfern's scent. But gloves can be planted, she cautions herself. Tip for sleuths. Personal items scream. Set up or slip up. Check for fit and wear. Trying it on discreetly, it's too large for her dainty hand. She notes its men's size, but supple enough for a woman. This clue tangles with the fabric scrap, suggesting a duo's involvement, lovers covering tracks. The revolver's position nags at Miss Marple, tossed aside, but aligned with the body's arm as if self-inflicted. Yet the wound's angle entry at the temple, exit skewed, rules suicide. Powder burns are absent, indicating distance. Slack reconstructs. Killer stood behind, perhaps surprising Protheroe during a confrontation. Miss Marple envisions the scene, moonlight filtering through. Leaves, the colonel turning at a noise, bang. But why no struggle marks? Protheroe was robust, unless drugged, but the autopsy shows no poison. Tip: weapon analysis reveals intent. Close range for passion, distance for calculation. She ponders if the gun was fired from the hedgerow, explaining. The footprints end. Garden soil yields more. A button, brass, and engraved with a crest from a blazer. Village tailor identifies it as from the colonel's old-school jacket, but he wasn't wearing it. Detached recently, thread fresh. Did the killer wear it as disguise, or snag it in a scuffle? Miss Marple checks wardrobes mentally. The vicar has no such finery. Redding's clothes are threadbare. Gladys Cram, however, men's clothes, perhaps she pocketed it. Evidence tip: lost items point to haste. Trace ownership through repairs or monograms. The button's polish suggests recent use, not long lost. As evidence mounts, Miss Marple catalogues it in her notebook, sketching diagrams of the garden layout. Positions matter. The body faced the vicarage, as if meeting someone from the house. Slack's team finds a partial print on the gate thumb, ridged oddly, like a scar. Comparing two suspects, Haydock has steady hands. Hawes bites his nails. Tom Redding has calluses from ploughing. Miss Marple arranges accidental handshakes, feeling. For scars, Redfern winces at a grip, revealing a burn from his dig tools. Tip: tactile clues are underrated. Use social norms to gather them ethically. The crime scene's atmosphere whispers to no robbery, wallet intact, watch ticking, personal, not profit. Miss Marple lingers as dusk falls, recreating shadows. The killer hid behind the yew tree. Perhaps a broken twig there at shoulder height. Height estimate 5'8", matching several suspects. Practical advice: reenact scenes at the same time. Light changes everything. She notes the church bell tolled just before the shot cover noise. Inspector Slack compiles reports, frustrated by contradictions. Evidence points everywhere and nowhere. Miss Marple shares select findings over tea, guiding without claiming credit. Merely observations, she demurs. He grumbles but listens, ordering rechecks. The village buzzes with leaked details, suspicions shifting like wind. Deeper digs reveal layered clues. Under the body, a crumpled note, ink smudged. Meet me at 10, urgent. Handwriting analysis pending, but Miss Marple recognizes the flourishes, or forged. Tip: documents deceive. Compared to known samples, note pressure for emotion. She procures letters from suspects via correspondence advice. A faint perfume lingers on the sheet lac. Griselda Clement's favorite. Was the vicar's wife there, or transferred innocently? Scents evaporate clues. Note them early. Miss Marple's nose, honed by years of baking, detects it strongly near the gate. As the sun sets on the scene, evidence paints a vivid, if confusing, picture. Footprints lead to Redfern, fibres to Hawes, glove to lover's plots. Miss Marple weaves them into narratives, testing fits. Human error leaves trails. The perfect crime is myth. Wrapping this exhaustive hunt, the physical clues have illuminated paths to guilt, but interpretation is key. Miss Marple's deductions sharpen, poised to confront lies with facts. In the next chapter, we'll witness interrogations intensify as suspects squirm under pressure and revelations tumble forth, drawing the noose tighter around the culprit. Chapter 5. Interrogations and revelations, with evidence mounting like storm clouds over the village green. The time for gentle probing gives way to pointed questions that cut through the fog of deception. Miss Marple, her eyes twinkling with quiet determination, watches as Inspector Slack ramps up the pressure in a series of intense interrogations, forcing suspects to reveal cracks in their facades. In this chapter, we'll dive into the heated exchanges that expose hidden truths, from tearful confessions to defiant denials, and see how Miss Marple's subtle interventions turn the tide, unveiling revelations that reshape the entire investigation and bring us one step closer to unmasking the murderer. The interrogations begin in earnest at the vicarage, now transformed into a makeshift interview room with its heavy oak table and flickering gas lamps casting long shadows. Inspector Slack, his face flushed with determination, starts with Lawrence Redfern, hauling the archaeologist in for a second round of questioning. Redfern slouches in the chair, his hands clasped tightly to hide their tremor. As Slack leans in close, voice booming, "Your footprints match the garden mud, and that cigarette stub screams your name. Admit it, you were there." Redfern protests, insisting his dig kept him occupied. But when Slack produces the glove with its telltale cologne, the man's composure cracks. he reveals a partial truth. Yes, he met Protheroe that night, not to kill, but to beg for more time on the excavation. Sight. The colonel laughed in his face, sparking a shoving match, but Redfern swears he left before any shot was fired. Miss Marple, listening from the adjoining room under the pretense of offering tea, notes the sweat beading on Redfern's brow and the way his eyes flick to the window, as if reliving the escape. Practical tip for interrogators: watch body language. A averted gaze often signals omitted details, like a hidden accomplice or unseen witness. Redfern's revelation opens a new angle. Perhaps the argument drew the real killer's attention. Shifting focus, Slack turns to Anne Protheroe, the widow, whose poised grief now seems laced with fear. Seated primly in her black mourning dress, she twists a handkerchief as Slack presses. Your note lured him to the garden. Meet me at 10. Urgent, and that lilac scent clings to the scene like guilt. What were you hiding? Anne's eyes, well, up and under the barrage, she breaks, admitting the note was hers, but not for murder. It was a desperate plea to discuss divorce. The colonel's cruelty had driven her to the brink, and she'd confided in Redfern for support, nothing more. But she confesses to arriving late, finding the body already cold, and fleeing in panic without. Raising the alarm, Slack pounces on the delay motive and opportunity, but Miss Marple interjects softly from the doorway, suggesting Anne's flight might stem from shame rather than guilt, drawing from a past village affair where a woman hid to protect her reputation. Tip for uncovering truths: build empathy in questioning. A sympathetic ear loosens tongues more than shouts. Anne's revelation paints her as vulnerable, but it also implicates Redfern. Further, did he act to protect her? Dr. Haydock is next, his medical bag thumping on the table as he sits with crossed arms, exuding professional calm. Slack hammers away. Your horse was ridden hard that night, and that scarred thumbprint on the gate care to explain. Haydock chuckles at first, dismissing it as coincidence, but when confronted with the timeline discrepancy from the farmhouse clock, his facade slips. He admits to a detour. After the birth, he rode past the vicarage to check on a patient, but heard the shot and galloped away, fearing involvement. Why not report it? Haydock reveals a damning secret: the colonel had blackmailed him over a youthful indiscretion. A botched procedure years ago that Protheroe discovered and used to dodge medical bills. The revelation stuns Slack, adding blackmail to the motive. Mix, but Miss Marple ponders aloud about the thumb scar, recalling Haydock's habit of gardening with bare hands. Perhaps the print is from an earlier visit. Practical advice: cross-check revelations with Mayans. A confession can be partial, hiding deeper layers like opportunity for the shot during that detour. Haydock's admission clears him somewhat witnesses. Place him at the farm too close to the time, but it exposes the colonel's darker side. A tyrant squeezing secrets for gain. The heat intensifies with Lettuce Protheroe and Ronald Hawes, interrogated together to exploit their connection. Lettuce fidgets with her pearls, while Hawes mops his brow with a handkerchief. As Slack lays out the evidence: that blue wool fibre from your scarf, curate, and the pressed flower alibi that doesn't hold water. You two were in the garden, weren't you? Under pressure, Lettuce bursts into sobs, confessing their rendezvous was a lie. They were actually at the manor, stealing a moment while the colonel was out, but heard him return early and hid. Hawes chimes in, voice quavering, revealing Protheroe caught them once before, threatening to disinherit Lettuce and ruin Hawes's career. But they insist they fled before the meeting time. Alibis now shattered but replaced with a new one. Each other in a compromising spot. Miss Marple, sipping tea nearby, observes Letty's trembling lip and Hawes's protective glance, reminding Slack of young love's follies. She shares a tip-test joint alibis by separating suspects, as coordinated lies often diverge in details. Their revelation adds jealousy to the pot but clears the gazebo story. Shifting suspicion elsewhere perhaps, the theft of the scarf points to framing. Tom Redding faces the grill next, his calloused hands clenched on the table, face weathered and defiant. Slack thrusts the muddy boot under his nose. Rose petals from the vicarage. Not your farm, you sneaked in to confront him over the eviction, didn't you? Redding's shoulders slump, and he admits creeping to the garden to plead one last time, offering his life savings. Protheroe mocked him, waving the revolver threateningly, but Redding claims he backed off, hearing footsteps approaching as he left. The revelation provides a witness angle that he see the killer, but Redding shakes his head, too scared to look back. Miss Marple, entering with a plate of biscuits, notes his genuine terror and suggests financial desperation rarely leads to calculated shots. More often, it's impulsive. Tip for revelations. Probe for sensory details. What did you hear or smell? Reading recalls a whiff of perfume lilac, linking back to Griselda or Anne, turning his confession into a bridge to other suspects. Gladys. Cram, the secretary, struts in with city-bred bravado, but slacks evidence barrage. The missing funds and clean shoes, despite the walk, chips away. She snaps at first, denying everything. But when shown the crumpled note's handwriting matched to her forged samples, she crumbles. Gladys reveals embezzling small sums to fund her escape from the colonel's lecherous advances. The note was a forgery, to lure him out, but for a confrontation, not murder. She chickened out and stayed home. The admission exposes fraud, but provides no gunshot link. Miss Marple whispers about the satchel's contents, prompting Gladys to produce hidden ledgers proving the blackmail. Practical tip: financial trails are gold mines. Follow the money to motives, but verify forgeries with ink, age, or pressure marks. This revelation broadens the colonel's victim list, suggesting a conspiracy or copycat. As interrogations wind down, revelations pile up. Arguments, blackmails, forgeries, peeling back layers of deceit. Slack mops his brow, notebook overflowing, while Miss Marple pieces it mentally, seeing patterns in the chaos. The colonel's meeting was a setup, but by whom? Human nature shines through. Pressure reveals truths, but also new lies. Tip for aspiring detectives: record reactions post-interrogation. Relief or lingering nerves betray depths. In closing this chapter of breakthroughs, the interrogations have illuminated hidden corners, reshaping suspects from shadows to fleshed out figures with grievances galore. Yet the killer remains elusive, perhaps hiding in overlooked details. Next, we'll explore Miss Marple's deepening deductions as she connects dots from evidence to revelations, forming theories that challenge assumptions and edge us toward the climax. Chapter 6. Deepening deductions connect the dots as revelations from the interrogations swirl like autumn leaves in a gust. Miss Marple retreats to her cozy cottage, her mind a whirlwind of connections waiting to be made. Armed with scraps of evidence and fragments of confessions, she begins the meticulous work of deduction, weaving disparate threads into a coherent pattern that points toward the truth. In this chapter, we'll follow her thought process as she links motives to alibis, evidence to admissions, and uncovers the subtle inconsistencies that reveal the killer's hand. all while sharing practical tips on how to think like a master sleuth. In Your Own Mysteries, Miss Marple settles into her armchair by the fire, a pot of tea steaming beside her and her notebook open on her lap. She starts with the timeline, sketching a simple chart of the fatal night, the Colonel's movements, the shot at approximately 10:15, the vicar's discovery shortly after. Cross-referencing with confessions, she notes Redfern's argument ended around 10 o'clock, Anne's intended meeting at 10 o'clock, but arrival late, Redding's plea just before. These overlaps suggest the garden was a busy spot. Yet no one claims to have seen another human nature's blind spot, she muses, where self-preservation clouds observation. Practical tip for deductions: create a visual timeline. Plot events like a map, marking intersections where paths cross unseen. Miss Marple draws lines between Redfern's shove and Redding's retreat, wondering if the farmer glimpsed the archaeologist fleeing, his cologne lingering like a ghost. Delving into the physical clues, Miss Marple examines the blue wool fibre under her magnifying glass, confirming its match to Hawes's scarf butt. Lettuce admitted stealing moments at the manor, not the garden. Could the fibre have transferred during a hug, or was it planted? Linking this to Haydock's blackmail revelation, she ponders if the doctor, with his scarred thumb, handled the scarf during a house call. Deductions thrive on chains. The fibre to the scarf to the lovers to disapproval. Perhaps Protheroe's threat to Hawes drove a desperate act. But the gunshot wound's angle suggests a shooter of average height, fitting Hawes, but not the taller Redfern. Tip for connecting dots: assign probabilities. Rate clues on reliability. Fibres can migrate, but wounds don't lie. Miss Marple assigns low odds to Hawes, his alibi now bolstered by lettuce, and shifts to Gladys's forgery. The crumpled note, forged by Gladys to lure the Colonel, ties neatly to Anne's genuine intent for divorce. Did Gladys know of Anne's plans and mimic her handwriting? To frame her, Miss Marple compares writing samples from her collection of village correspondence, spotting the flourish as Gladys's tell, but the ink smudge matches Anne's pen type. This deduction reveals layers: embezzlement as motive for Gladys, but her chickening out suggests cowardice, not cold-blooded killing. Linking to the wiped revolver, Miss Marple envisions a gloved hand. The monogrammed glove smelled of sandalwood, Redfern's scent, but Anne uses similar cologne, perhaps a shared item in their affair. Human nature tip: affairs breed shared secrets and items. Trace possessions back to relationships. She deduces the glove was dropped intentionally to implicate Redfern, protecting the real culprit. Inspector Slack drops by for tea, grumbling about dead ends, and Miss Marple gently guides him with questions. Have you considered the lilac perfume's strength? It faded quickly, suggesting a recent application. This connects to Griselda Clement, whose scent was noted by Redding. Perhaps the vicar's wife was in the garden, not preparing supper as claimed. Deducting further, Miss Marple recalls Griselda's flour-dusted apron without baking smells, a staged alibi linked to her dramatic flair. The vicar argued with Protheroe over foons. Could Griselda have acted to protect her husband? Tip for deepening insights: revisit alibis, post-revelations. New facts cast old lies in fresh light. Slack's eyes widen as Miss Marple connects the bent gate latch to a hairpin, and Griselda's elaborate updo often sheds them, pouring over the cigarette stub. Miss Marple links it to Redfern's habit, but Anne's cassette. The stub was half buried, as if stomped out in haste. Deduction: The smoker lingered, watching the argument, then struck. Redfern's confession places him there early, but Haydock's detour ride could have included a smoke break. The doctor's horse lather indicates speed, but a pause fits if he overheard blackmail threats reigniting. Miss Marple tests this mentally. Haydock's healer hands versus killer's grip unlikely, but desperation changes people. Practical advice. Role-play scenarios. Imagine suspects in the act to spot mismatches. She rules out Haydock when linking his timeline to the farmhouse birth. The midwife's nap was brief, not enough for a round trip. The brass button nags at her from a blazer recently detached, linking to the colonel's school crest, but he wore tweed. Miss Marple deduces it came from Ronald Horse's rarely worn formal jacket, seen at a recent fete. Hawes, with his fiery sermons against sin, might have confronted Protheroe over the forbidden romance, button-popping in a struggle. But the footprint's worn heel doesn't match Hawes's, even soles. Instead, it fits Tom Redding's boots, caked with rose petals, deduction chain, reading pleads, button snags on thorns during retreat. No, the button was near the body. Perhaps reading returned, or the button was carried on his boot. Tip: clues can hitch rides. Consider mobility of small items. As night falls, Miss Marple paces her garden, connecting the church bell's chime to the shot timed to mask the noise. Only a local would know the bell's schedule, ruling out outsiders. This deduction narrows. 2 villagers with grudges, readying for eviction, Gladys for advances, Griselda for protection. But the missing letter opener from Protheroe's desk mentioned earlier links to Gladys's access. Perhaps a red herring. Miss Marple smiles, seeing the pattern, multiple setups, suggesting a clever mind orchestrating confusion. Human natures. Predictability. Killers overcomplicate to deflect. Slack returns with autopsy details. No powder burns. Confirming distance shot. Miss Marple deduces the hedgerow hiding spot, footprints ending there. Linking to Redfern's dig tools, a spade could dig a stance, but his alibi holds post-argument. Instead, she eyes the curate's nervous hands. Hawes gardens at the church, knowing the terrain. Tip: match skills to clues. Archaeology digs holes, but clergy know sacred grounds. Deepening further, Miss Marple considers psychological profiles, Anne's tears genuine. Redfern's bravado masking fear, Redding's defiance born of poverty. The killer's calm post-murder suggests calculation, fitting Gladys's city sharpness or Haydock's steady nerves. But a tip from Dolly Bantry overheard whispers of Protheroe's. Will reveals Lettuce inherits little Anne gets the estate. Deduction, financial reversal as motive for an IBE, but her panic flight argues against Dot in her quiet way. Miss Marple shares deductions with Slack, planting seeds. Observe how clues cluster around love and money, the eternal twins. He nods, ordering tail on key suspects. Miss Marple's mind races ahead, theories solidifying like knitting rows, wrapping this chapter of intricate connections. Miss Marple's deductions have transformed chaos into clarity, highlighting paths to guilt while eliminating dead ends. Yet, questions linger, demanding confrontation. In the next chapter, we'll witness tense face-offs as suspects are challenged with these insights, leading to breakdowns and perhaps the killer's slip. Chapter 7. Confrontations and breaking points with deductions sharpening like a well-honed knife. The investigation escalates to direct confrontations, where Miss Marple's gentle persistence meets suspects' crumbling defenses in a series of charged encounters. secrets long buried surface under the weight of pointed accusations, pushing some to their breaking points and revealing the fractures in even the sturdiest lies. In this chapter, we'll explore these pivotal showdowns, from heated arguments to emotional collapses, and learn how Miss Marple navigates them with empathy and acuity, offering tips on confronting without cornering to extract the purest truths. The confrontations ignite at the Protheroe manor, where Inspector Slack gathers. Key players under the guise of a progress update. Anne Protheroe, pale and composed, faces Slack's barrage first, your note. The perfume, the delayed alarmits, all too convenient. Mrs. Protheroe. Anne stiffens, but Miss Marple, seated unobtrusively in the corner, interjects softly, "My dear, sometimes fear makes us foolish." Was it fear of scandal or something more? Under this dual pressure, Anne breaks, admitting her affair with Redfern was emotional, not physical, and she arrived to find the body, touching nothing but fleeing to avoid association with divorce rumors. The breaking point reveals vulnerability, not villainy, practical tip for confrontations. Pair authority with kindness. It disarms defenses, encouraging candor over combat. Anne's tears confirm her innocence, but implicate Redfern's protective lies. Redfern is next, dragged in sweating from his dig. Slack slams the table, the glove, the cigarette. "Your argument, you finished what you started." Redfern bristles, denying, but Miss Marple leans forward. "Young man, passion can cloud judgment. Did you return to defend her honor?" The confrontation peaks as Redfern collapses into a chair. Confessing he circled back after hearing footsteps, witnessing a shadow by the hedgerow, but bolting when the shot rang out. His breaking point exposes cowardice, not crime. He saw a figure in a dark coat, average build. Tip, press on emotions. Guilt over inaction often spills more than direct guilt. This confrontation clears Redfern somewhat, pointing to a hidden observer, shifting to the vicarage. Slack corners, Griselda Clement in the kitchen. Flour still dusting her hands from genuine baking this time. That lilac scent at the scene, your staged alibi. What were you hiding in the garden? Griselda laughs nervously at first, but Miss Marple's calm gaze unravels her. We women bear burdens quietly. Was it for your husband's sake? Griselda's facade cracks, sobs echoing as she admits, slipping out to meet Protheroe. Privately he'd accused Leonard of mismanaging funds, threatening exposure. She begged him to reconsider, but he refused. She left before 10 o'clock, hearing nothing. The breaking point reveals marital loyalty, linking to the vicar's argument, but not the murder. Confrontation advice. Use shared experiences. Relating personally builds trust, loosening tightly held secrets. Griselda's confession adds pressure on Leonard, whose study window overlooked the scene. Dr. Haydock arrives next, summoned to the manor, his bag clutched like a shield. Slack accuses, blackmail victim with a detour alibi. You had means and motive. Haydock stands firm, but Miss Marple probes gently. Healing hands don't harm, but protecting one's past might. Did the ride include a stop? Under scrutiny, Haydock reaches his breaking point, voice cracking as he reveals the blackmail was over a mercy killing in his youth. Not a botch. Protheroe twisted it for leverage. He admits pausing near the vicarage, smoking to calm nerves, but heard the bell and shot simultaneously, galloping away. Tip, time confrontations. Fatigue or surprise lowers guards, revealing involuntary tells like voice tremors. Haydock's honesty clears him, the cigarette stub now his. but the shadow Redfern saw doesn't match his burly frame. The tension mounts with Lettuce and Hawes, confronted together in the church vestry for dramatic effect. Slack thunders, the fibre, the lies, the threats against your romance. One of you pulled the trigger. Lettuce clutches Hawes's arm, but Miss Marple's soft question pierces. Love can inspire folly. Was the scarf left to mislead? Hawes breaks first, knees buckling as he confesses borrowing the revolver earlier to scare Protheroe anonymously, but chickening out and returning it. Lettuce admits planting the fibre to shift blame, fearing her inheritance cut their joint. Breaking Point exposes deceit, but not murder. The revolver was back in the study pre-shot. Practical tip: confront pairs dynamically. One often cracks to protect the other, cascading truths. This revelation rules them out. The button from Hawes' jacket lost innocently during a prior visit. Tom Redding faces off in his humble farmhouse, family peering from doorways. Slack looms, boots in the mud, plea turned violent. He stomped out his life like those petals. Readying roars denial, but Miss Marple's empathetic tone calms. Desperation for family can drive extremes. What did you truly see fleeing? Redding's Breaking Point arrives in a whisper. He glimpsed a woman in a shawl slipping away post-shot. Lilac wafting, tip, offer understanding. It transforms confrontation into catharsis, yielding details like scents or silhouettes. Redding's vision links back to an aura Griselda, but timelines clash. Gladys Cram is last, in the manor study, her sharp eyes defiant. Slack presents ledgers, forgery, embezzlement. The note you set the trap and sprung it. Gladys sneers, but Miss Marple's observation hits. City ways hide, village hurts. Were his advances the final straw? Gladys shatters, hurling a vase as she admits luring him with the note to confront his harassment, arriving armed with a letter opener for protection. She argued, he grabbed the revolver. A struggle ensued, but she fled when he aimed at himself. In rage, no, she insists the shot came from outside as she ran. Her breaking point reveals self-defense, gone awry, but no fatal pull. Confrontation tip: mirror their strength. Matching wit provokes slips in overconfident types. As confrontations conclude, breaking points have yielded clarifications and new puzzles. Shadows, scents, struggles. Miss Marple absorbs it all, her deductions evolving in wrapping these intense face-offs. The confrontations have stripped away layers of deception, exposing raw truths and narrowing the field. But the killer's identity hovers just out of reach, demanding a final push. Join us next as Miss Marple assembles the puzzles. Last pieces, leading to shocking twists that append everything. Chapter 8. Assembling the puzzle's last pieces, with confrontations echoing like distant thunder. Miss Marple gathers the scattered clues in her mind, piecing together the final fragments to form a clearer image of the killer's cunning plan. Each deduction now locks into place, revealing overlooked connections that lead to shocking twists and appended assumptions about innocence and guilt. In this chapter, we'll join her in this meticulous assembly, exploring how seemingly minor details explode into major revelations, and pick up practical tips on synthesizing evidence to avoid red herrings in your own detective endeavors. Miss Marple returns to her cottage, spreading out her notes on the lace-covered table like a jigsaw puzzle waiting for completion. She starts with the timeline overlaps, now enriched by confessions. Redfern's argument at 9:45, Redding's plea at 10 o'clock, Griselda's begging at 9:50, Gladys's aborted confrontation around 10:05. And the shot at 10:15, masked by the bell, assembling. These, she sees a crowded garden sequence multiple visitors, yet the colonel met each briefly. The shocking twist emerges. The killer wasn't one of them, but used their presences as cover, slipping in during the chaos. Practical tip for puzzle assembly. Layer timelines visually on paper. Color coding, suspects. Overlaps highlight orchestration, like a conductor timing entrances. Miss Marple sketches it, spotting a gap at 10:10 enough for a hidden figure, turning. To physical evidence, she re-examines the wiped revolver and glove. The monogram LP initially suggested Lucius Protheroe, but twisting it, she realizes it could be Leonard something, Leonard Clement. The vicar, whose middle name is Percival, monogrammed on old items. The glove's size fits a man's hand, and the vicar's study held similar leather ones for gardening. Assembling with Haydock's cigarette stub nearby, she twists further. The stub was planted, as Haydock smokes pipes, usually not Egyptians, perhaps swiped from Redfern's supply by someone with access to both. This revelation appends Haydock's. Cleared status slightly, but links to the vicar, who counseled Redfern on sins. Tip for synthesizing clues. Group by category weapon, personal items, then crosslink. Planted evidence often points back to the planter's habits. Miss Marple tests by recalling the vicar's flustered alibi. His window view perfect for a distant shot if using a silencer. But no, the revolver wasn't silenced. Wait, the bell masked. The lilac perfume nags next, assembled with Redding's glimpsed shorewoman and Griselda's scent. But twist, Anne wears lilac too, confessed in confrontation, and Gladys mentioned a whiff during her run. Miss Marple pieces it. The perfume was sprayed deliberately at the scene post-shot to implicate women, a misdirection by a male killer aware of village scents. Shocking append. This points away from Anne or Griselda towards someone like the vicar or Hawes, who know household details. Practical advice: scents are volatile clues. Consider application. Timing fresh means recent, faded means planted. She assembles with the bent latch hairpin, not a woman's, but perhaps a curate's collar pin, twisted for picking. Hawes's nervous habits include fiddling with pins, and his jacket button matches the found one, deepening the assembly. Miss Marple connects blackmail, revelations Protheroe, squeezed Haydock, threatened Hawes, evicted Redding, harassed Gladys, argued with Clement over funds. The twist: church funds discrepancies weren't mismanagement, but Protheroe's embezzlement, discovered by the vicar during audits. Leonard, with his moral compass, confronted privately but was rebuffed. The study: argument escalated, piecing with the missing letter opener. It was in the vicar's desk. Sharp enough for defense, but unused. Perhaps the revolver was grabbed instead. Revelation: the vicar, overlooked as meek, had motive protecting the church, an opportunity. Home turf. Tip for last pieces: revisit the least suspicious. Human nature hides guilt in plain sight, like a vicar behind piety. Miss Marple murmurs to herself, assembling the footprints worn heel, the vicar's shoes, scuffed from parish walks, match perfectly. Slack arrives unannounced, sharing a new autopsy twist. Trace poison in the colonel's system, not lethal, but slowing reactions, gout medicine overdosed. Assembled with Haydock's treatments, but the doctor prescribed correctly. Someone tampered, like the secretary with access to meds. Gladys's embezzlement links. She discovered Protheroe's fund theft. Confronted, but he turned tables with harassment claims. Shocking twist: Gladys and the vicar colluded. No, Miss Marple deduces Gladys spiked the medicine to weaken him for her confrontation, but fled before acting. This appends Gladys's innocence, but the shot came later. Practical tip, toxicology. Adds layers. Connect to access and expertise doctors. Secretaries handle meds. Miss Marple links to the crumpled note, forged by Gladys, but the Colonel carried it, meaning he believed it from Anne. The brass button and blue fibre assemble into a frame job button from Hawes, fibre from his scarf, planted to implicate the lovers, who benefits. Lettuce inherits if scandal avoided, but twist. The will favours the church heavily. Discovered in Protheroe's safe post-death revelation, the vicar, as churchwarden, knew this, motive amplifying to financial gain for the parish. Appending assumptions. Miss Marple sees Leonard not as victim but opportunist, using the bell to time the shot from his study window distance, explains no powder burns. Tip, wills are motive magnets. Request copies discreetly via estate concerns. She assembles the thumbprint scar. The vicar cut his hand on a chalice recently, bandaged but healed roughly. As pieces click, Miss Marple visits the church, staring at the bell tower. Twist, the bell rang automatically, but could be triggered. Manually Hawes, as curate, handles it. Assembling with his borrowed revolver confession, he returned it, but perhaps lent it to the vicar first. Shocking revelation, Hawes and Clement conspired. The curate providing the gun, vicar pulling trigger to cleanse the sin of embezzlement. But no, Miss Marple twists again. Solitary act, Hawes's involvement peripheral. Practical advice, test. Assemblies by elimination. If one piece doesn't fit, swap suspects. Ruling out conspiracy, she pins the vicar. Footprints lead to hedgerow, but a side path from study avoids gravel. Final assembly hits like lightning. The shadow Redfern saw was the vicar in clerical robes, mistaken for a coat. Gladys's struggle. Left Protheroe, dazed from spiked meds, easy target. Miss Marple nods, puzzle nearly whole, but one twist lingers the revolver's wipe, vicar's gloves. Monogrammed his father's, LP for Leonard Percival Sr. Slack listens as Miss Marple shares, his skepticism turning to awe. The assembly transforms hunches into a damning narrative, appending the villagers' view of their spiritual leader. Enclosing this chapter of final fittings and jolting turns, Miss Marple's puzzle assembly has revealed a tapestry of deception, with twists redirecting suspicion to the heart of St. Mary Mead. Yet confirmation awaits in confrontation. Next, we'll charge into the climax as accusations fly and the killer's mask slips, leading to a confession that rocks the village. Chapter 9. Climax, accusations, and the mask slips as the assembled puzzle gleams with unsettling clarity. The investigation hurtles toward its climax, where Miss Marple orchestrates a gathering of suspects for accusations that strip away the final veils of pretense. Tensions boil over in a room thick with anticipation, as denials crumble and the killer's composure fractures, exposing the raw truth beneath. In this chapter, we'll immerse in these electrifying moments, detailing the strategic reveals and emotional eruptions, while offering tips on staging climactic confrontations to ensure justice prevails without chaos. The climax unfolds in the vicarage parlour, candles flickering against darkening windows as Miss Marple suggests a village meeting to Slack, who rounds up everyone under pretense of case closure. Suspects arrive wary, Anne pale in black, Redfern fidgeting, Griselda clutching her husband's arm, Haydock stern, Lettuce with Hawes, Redding glowering, Gladys sharp-witted. Miss Marple sits demurely, knitting needles clicking like a countdown. Slack opens gruffly. We've pieced it, all motives, lies, clues, time for the truth. Practical tip for climaxes: gather in neutral ground. Familiarity breeds slips. Group pressure amplifies cracks. Miss Marple nods approval, her eyes scanning reactions. She begins accusations subtly. Addressing Redfern, your arguments set the stage, but you fled yet the glove implicates you falsely. Redfern nods relief, but Miss Marple twists, planted. By one who knew your scent. Eyes shift, turning to Anne. Your note was genuine, but forged copies, muddied watersphere, kept you silent. Anne weeps, cleared but shamed. The mask slips first with Gladys. Miss Marple accuses. You spiked his medicine and forged the lure, but cowardice saved you from the shot. Gladys erupts. He deserved it for his groping hands, but denies murder. Tip: start with partial clears. It builds trust, isolating the guilty. Gladys's outburst confirms tampering, her face flushing guiltily. Haydock faces next. Blackmail broke your spirit, but your detour made you witness. Not killer the stub was yours, but planted later. Haydock exhales, mask of stoicism cracking, into gratitude. Miss Marple accuses the lovers. Let us whores your deceptions protected love, but the fibre and button were red herrings you didn't plant. Lettuce clings to whores, who stammers denial, their united fronts slipping into mutual support. Redding's turn. Eviction drove you to beg, but you saw the shawl figure, not a woman, but robes. Redding nods, anger melting to realization. Practical. Advice: reveal visions last. Eyewitness slips, unmasked disguises. The room buzzes, suspicion converging. Griselda tenses as Miss Marple addresses her. Your plea for your husband, the lilac spray to confuse, but it was a diversion. Griselda protests, I protected Leonard. Her mask of vivacity fracturing into desperation. The climax peaks with the vicar. Miss Marple rises, voice steady. Reverend Clement, the embezzled funds you discovered. The church's legacy at stake you confronted, struggled, and from your study, timed the shot with the bell. Leonard pales, absurd. But Miss Marple piles on. Your father's glove, the scarred print, worn heels. The revolver from your desk, wiped clean, but motive pure in your eyes, cleansing sign. The room gasps, slack advancing. Leonard's mask slips spectacularly, he slumps, tears flowing. Protheroe was a blight stealing from God, ruining lives. I meant to reason, but he drew the gun in rage. I wrested it, fired in panic from afar. Confession tumbles, the poison unknown to him, the plants his doing to frame others, preserving the church's inheritance. Tip for unmasking: layer evidence chronologically. It recreates the crime, forcing reliving and admission. Leonard's breakdown rocks all Griselda's sobs. Villagers stunned at the meek man's darkness. Slack cuffs him gently, the climax diffusing into somber acceptance. Miss Marple comforts Griselda. Human frailty, my dear. Even good intentions twist. Revelations settle. No conspiracy, just one man's fall. Practical tip: end with empathy. It heals the group, preventing vigilante fallout in wrapping this charged climax of accusations and slipped masks. The truth has burst forth, reshaping St. Mary Mead forever. But resolution beckons with aftermath reflections. In our final chapter, we'll unveil the ultimate revelation and tie loose ends, leaving no stone unturned. Chapter 10. the ultimate revelation and village healing in the aftermath of the climactic accusations. St. Mary Mead grapples with the shattering truth that their trusted vicar, Leonard Clement, is the murderer behind Colonel Protheroe's death. Revelation that sends ripples of disbelief through the tight-knit community. Miss Marple, her expression a mix of sorrow and resolve, stands as the quiet architect of justice, ensuring every loose end is tied while offering solace to those left in the wake of betrayal. In this final chapter, we'll uncover the full depth of the vicar's motives, explore the lingering impacts on the villagers, and reflect on the timeless lessons of human nature, all while sharing practical insights on how closure in a mystery can lead to personal growth and community mending. The morning after the confession dawns grey and heavy over St. Mary Mead. The church bells silent for the first time in memory, as if mourning the fall of their keeper. Inspector Slack, his usual bluster subdued, processes the arrest with efficiency, but it's Miss Marple who delves deeper into the revelation. Visiting the vicarage to speak with Griselda one last time. Griselda, eyes red from crying, clutches a handkerchief as Miss Marple sits beside her on the worn sofa. He did it for the church, Griselda whispers, revealing how Leonard discovered Protheroe's embezzlement of parish funds, months ago siphoning money meant for the poor into his own shady investments. Leonard confronted him repeatedly in private, but Protheroe laughed it off, threatening to expose fabricated scandals about the vicar's past to ruin him. The ultimate motive crystallized, not just protection, but a twisted sense of divine justice, seeing the colonel as a corrupting force that needed removal to safeguard the village's soul. Miss Marple nods understandingly, explaining how good intentions can warp into darkness, drawing from her vast observations of life. Practical tip for wrapping mysteries: always probe the why beyond the who. Motives often hide in moral grey areas, like a vicar's piety masking vengeance. As details emerge, the revelation ties every clue seamlessly. The spiked medicine Gladys is doing, weakening Protheroe for her own confrontation, but unknowingly aiding Leonard by making the colonel sluggish and easy to surprise. The forged note lured him out, but Leonard, watching from his study, seized the chaos of multiple visitors. Redfern's shove leaving Protheroe angry, Redding's plea distracting him, Griselda's begging softening him momentarily. Leonard slipped into the garden via a hidden path, using his knowledge of the bell's chime to mask the shot from the hedgerow, the distance explaining the lack of powder burns. The wiped revolver was his own quick thinking, gloves from his father's old set monogrammed LP, dropped accidentally but later inspiring plants like the fibre and button to frame others. The scarred thumbprint came from a recent cut while repairing the chalice, and the worn heel matched his daily parish rounds. Miss Marple recounts this to Slack over tea, her voice steady. It was a crime of opportunity born from desperation, not premeditation at least, not fully. Slack admits her deductions were pivotal, grumbling that without her, he'd have pinned it on Redfern or Anne. Tip for ultimate revelations: reconstruct the crime step by step with all evidence. It not only confirms guilt, but heals doubts, turning chaos into catharsis. The village reacts in waves of shock and introspection. At the Blue Boar pub, old Mr. Archer toasts somberly, admitting he always found the vicar too saintly to be true. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, spreads the news with uncharacteristic restraint, focusing on how Protheroe's will now benefits the church fully. Ironic justice that eases some financial woes, like Redding's eviction, which is reversed by the estate. Tom Redding, relieved, visits Miss Marple with a basket of eggs, thanking her for seeing his innocence amid the mud. She advises him to channel desperation into community aid, perhaps volunteering at the parish. Dr. Haydock, freed from blackmails, Shadow resumes his rounds with renewed vigor, confiding in Miss Marple that the ordeal reminded him of medicine's true purpose, feeling wounds seen and unseen. Practical insight, in resolution, address ripple effects, helping victims rebuild fosters closure. Like prescribing forgiveness as a balm for betrayal. Anne Protheroe, now widow and heiress to the manor, minus the church bequest, finds unexpected peace. She confides in Miss Marple during a garden walk that her loveless marriage taught her resilience, and with Redfern's support purely platonic now, focused on his dig-she plans to turn the estate into a community centre. Miss Marple smiles, noting how tragedy can birth renewal, much like pruning roses for better blooms. Lawrence Redfern, cleared but chastened by his cowardice, redoubles his archaeological efforts, inviting villagers to lectures that bridge past and present. Even Gladys Cram, facing minor charges for embezzlement and forgery, decides to stay, using her sharp skills for honest work at the post office. Miss Marple's gentle counsel helps her see city bravado masked village belonging. Tip for tying loose. Ends. Interview all involved post-revelation. Their futures often reveal overlooked motives or alibis, ensuring no threads dangle. Lettuce and whores. Their romance no longer forbidden, plan a quiet wedding, with whores stepping up as interim curate. Miss Marple attends their engagement tea, observing how young love, tested by fire, emerges stronger. She shares a story from her youth of a similar scandal that ended in happiness. The revelation's deepest impact hits Griselda, who moves to a neighbouring parish with family support, vowing to honour Leonard's good deeds while condemning his fall. Miss Marple writes her letters of encouragement, emphasizing that one act doesn't define a life. As for Leonard, in his cell, he confesses fully to Slack, finding a measure of peace in atonement, his ultimate revelation a plea for the villagers. Forgiveness, Miss Marple reflects in her cottage, knitting by the window as evening falls. Human nature, she muses, is a tapestry of light and shadow greed. Love, faith, twisted into knots, but capable of unraveling toward truth. The murder exposed. St. Mary Mead's underbelly, but also its resilience. Neighbours now chat more openly, secrets less burdensome. Practical final tip. After solving, reflect on lessons. Mysteries teach empathy, turning observers into wiser souls. Miss Marple sips her tea, ready for whatever whisper next stirs the village calm, and there you have it, the complete unravelling of the village killing, solved by the incomparable Miss Marple. If you enjoyed this tale of deduction and deception, hit that like button, subscribe for more mystery adventures, and comment below, who did you suspect all along? Your thoughts keep the conversation alive.